All right, everyone, get ready, because today we are diving deep into biomolecules.
Biomolecule.
They're these,
Yeah.
tiny but powerful molecules,
Yeah.
and they make up all living things.
Yeah.
Like, think about it. The sugars that, give us energy,
Right.
the proteins that build our muscles,
Uh-huh.
even our DNA,
Yeah.
which holds our entire genetic code.
Absolutely.
It's like mind-blowing how complex it is when you really think about it.
What's so incredible is we're talking about everything that makes life possible. I mean, everything. Even the tiniest bacteria, the largest redwood tree,
Wow.
all built from these same, fundamental building blocks.
It really is like nature just has this super versatile toolkit,
Yeah.
and it just keeps rearranging these basic pieces to create, this crazy diversity of life that we see.
Absolutely. And it's those basic pieces, those biomolecules that we're going to break down today. We're talking carbs, proteins, nucleic acids, the big ones,
Yeah.
and even essential regulators like vitamins and hormones.
Okay, so I think when most people hear the word carbs,
Yeah.
they just automatically think about bread and
Well,
pasta.
right.
But is there more to it than that?
Absolutely. I mean, carbohydrates are way more than just fuel.
Oh, okay.
They provide structure in plants, play a huge role in cell signaling.
Wow.
They even help with blood clotting.
Wow, I didn't realize that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but I think we got to back up for a second. What even is a carbohydrate?
So at the most basic level, carbohydrates are made up of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen.
Okay.
And the ratio of hydrogen to oxygen is similar to that in water. That's where we get the name hydrates of carbon.
Oh, that makes sense now.
Yeah.
Okay, but I do remember learning about different types of carbs when I was in school.
Uh-huh.
There's simple sugars and complex starches. How does that all fit in?
It all comes down to how the building blocks are arranged. So the simplest are monosaccharides.
Okay.
These are your single sugar molecules like glucose. Think
Right.
about a quick energy boost from a sugary drink.
Oh, yeah.
Or fructose. That's what makes fruit sweet. So that's your single carb.
Okay, so we got our single carb. What about the couples? Is there a couples carb?
That would be disaccharides, where
Yeah.
two monosaccharides are linked together. So sucrose, like table sugar, is the classic example. It's glucose and fructose, just joining forces.
Okay.
And then you have lactose, which is what gives milk its sweetness,
Mhm.
and maltose, found in malt sugar.
Okay, so we've got our singles, we've got our couples. What about the whole party? What's the big group?
That's polysaccharides. And that's where things get really cool because they can be massive chains of these sugar molecules all forming complex structures, like starch, which is how plants store energy. That's a prime example. And in animals, it's glycogen, our own personal energy stash.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like nature's playing with Legos.
Exactly.
You got your single sugar brick.
Yeah.
And then you got these huge complex starch structures, megastructures.
And that structural complexity is what gives polysaccharides all their different roles.
Oh, wow.
Think about cellulose, which gives plants their rigidity. It's what makes wood strong. You wouldn't get that with just simple sugars.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. So if we know all these different types of carbs, what does that even mean for us? How does that knowledge apply to our everyday lives?
Well, think about the food you eat every day.
Okay.
The type of carbohydrate you're consuming actually affects how quickly your body breaks it down and absorbs it.
Oh.
Simple sugars give you that quick burst of energy, right? Because they're absorbed so rapidly.
Right.
But complex carbs, like those found in whole grains, release energy way slower.
So that's why a candy bar gives you that sugar rush and then you totally crash.
Exactly.
Versus a bowl of oatmeal
Yeah.
that keeps you going for a while, makes you feel full longer.
Precisely. And beyond energy, the type of carbohydrate also influences things like blood sugar levels,
Oh, wow.
gut health,
Okay.
even your risk for some diseases.
Wow. So picking the right kind of carbs is super important.
It is.
Makes you think twice about just grabbing that sugary snack.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's switch gears for a sec.
Yeah.
And talk about proteins.
Okay.
I've always heard them being described as the building blocks
Yeah.
of the body. But what does that even mean?
It literally means that proteins are involved in every single function in your body.
Wow.
Building, repairing tissues, transporting molecules, catalyzing chemical reactions. Proteins do it all.
So how can they be so versatile? What gives them that ability to do all these different things?
It's all about their structure.
Okay.
They're built from chains of amino acids. Think of them as like links in a chain.
Okay.
And there are 20 different types of these amino acids. Each one has its own unique properties.
So it's like having an alphabet of 20 letters.
Exactly.
But instead of building words, you're building different proteins
Yeah,
with a specific sequence of amino acids.
precisely. And just like the order of letters in a word totally changes its meaning,
Right.
the specific sequence of amino acids in a protein determines the protein's ultimate shape and function.
Okay, so the order matters. But is there more to it than just like a simple chain?
Of course, there are actually 4 levels of structure in proteins.
Oh, wow.
So the primary structure is just that linear sequence of amino acids.
Okay.
But then those chains start to like fold and twist,
Yeah.
forming what's called secondary structures, like alpha helices picture, like a spiral staircase,
Okay.
and beta sheets, which are more like a pleated paper fan.
Oh, okay. I can picture that.
Yeah,
So those shapes are created by like interactions between the amino acids in the chain.
exactly. And it gets even more complex.
Oh, no.
Those secondary structures fold even further, and that creates this unique, like, 3-dimensional shape.
Okay.
It's called the tertiary structure. And this is what gives a protein its specific function.
Yep.
It's like a key fitting into a lock, only the right shape will work.
Right, right. So it's not just the amino acid sequence that's important, but how that sequence folds up.
You got it. And sometimes you get multiple protein chains coming together to form even larger complexes.
Okay.
And that's called the quaternary structure. Like hemoglobin, for example,
Mm.
that's the protein that carries oxygen in our blood.
Mm-hmm.
It's made up of 4 separate protein chains
Oh, wow.
that fit together perfectly to do their job.
So it's like nature's playing 3D Tetris with these molecules
Yeah.
building increasingly complex structures.
And if those structures get disrupted, the protein can lose its function.
Ooh. Yeah.
Think about what happens when you cook an egg.
Right.
The heat denatures the proteins, causing them to unfold and solidify.
That makes sense. It's amazing to think about how much is packed into these tiny proteins. And they're responsible for everything our bodies do.
I know, it's crazy. And speaking of complex molecules, I think we got to talk about nucleic acids.
Oh, yeah, nucleic acids. Those are the ones that carry, like, our genetic information, right?
You got it.
DNA and RNA.
Exactly. DNA is basically like the blueprint of life. It contains all the instructions for how to build and like maintain an organism.
Okay.
And RNA, that's like the messenger, carrying those instructions from DNA to the ribosomes, which are like the protein factories in the cell.
So they work together. Like DNA holds the master plan, and RNA is the one that delivers the blueprints to the construction crew.
That's a perfect way to put it. So both DNA and RNA are built from these repeating units called nucleotides.
Oh, wait.
Each nucleotide has 3 parts: a sugar molecule, a phosphate group, and a nitrogenous base.
So like a 3-part building block.
Yeah,
But there are differences between DNA and RNA, right?
absolutely. So first, the sugars are different. DNA uses deoxyribose while RNA uses ribose, hence the names deoxyribonucleic acid and ribonucleic acid.
Oh, that makes sense. Okay, and what about those nitrogenous bases? I kind of remember learning about them, but it's all a bit fuzzy.
Well, there are 4 bases in DNA: adenine, guanine, cytosine, and thymine. A, G, C, T. RNA also has A, G, and C, but instead of T, it has uracil, or U.
Okay.
So it's almost like a slightly different code between the 2.
Yeah, and what about that whole, like, double helix structure of DNA, that, like, twisted ladder shape?
That is a super important feature of DNA.
Yeah.
So the 2 strands of the ladder are made up of alternating sugar and phosphate groups.
Okay.
And the rungs, those are formed by the nitrogenous bases, pairing up in a very specific way. A always with T, and C always with G. This base pairing is what allows DNA to replicate itself perfectly during cell division.
Wow.
So all that genetic information gets passed on to the next generation.
So it's like a perfect zipper holding those 2 strands of DNA together.
Yeah.
And that's how, like, we get our traits from our parents.
Exactly. So each parent contributes 1 strand of DNA,
Okay.
and those combine to form the double helix of the child's DNA. Now, RNA, that's usually single-stranded,
Right.
but it can fold back on itself to form complex shapes, which are important for how it works.
You mentioned earlier that RNA is, like, the messenger, right?
Yeah.
But I think I've also heard that there are, like, different types of RNA.
You're right. There are 3 main types of RNA, each one with a specific job in protein synthesis. So first we have messenger RNA, or mRNA.
Okay.
That's the one that carries the genetic code from DNA in the nucleus to those ribosomes in the cytoplasm.
Okay, so it's like the courier delivering the blueprints.
Exactly. Then there's ribosomal RNA, or rRNA, which is a part of the ribosomes themselves.
Okay,
Those are the sites where proteins are actually made.
so those are the construction sites, and RNA is part of the machinery?
You got it. And then lastly, you have transfer RNA, or tRNA, which acts like a translator.
Oh, okay.
It brings the correct amino acids to the ribosome based on the mRNA instructions.
So like tRNA is reading the blueprint
Uh-huh.
and grabbing the right building materials.
Yeah, it's a crazy, intricate process. It's all super coordinated.
Wow. It's crazy to think how much is going on inside our cells all the time.
Yeah.
But we've been focusing on those, like big players,
Mm-hmm.
carbs, proteins, nucleic acids. What about the smaller but like equally important ones,
Like what?
like vitamins and hormones?
They may be smaller, but they play super important roles in like regulating bodily functions. So vitamins, those are organic compounds that we need, but we can't actually produce them ourselves. We
Right.
have to get them from food.
Okay. And there are different types of vitamins, right? Like fat-soluble and water-soluble.
Yes. So fat-soluble vitamins like A, D, E, and K, those can be stored in the body,
Okay.
whereas water-soluble vitamins like the B vitamins and vitamin C, those need to be replenished regularly. And each vitamin has its own unique functions. For example, vitamin D helps with calcium absorption and like bone health. Vitamin C, that's an antioxidant.
Yeah.
And it helps with collagen production.
So it's not just about getting enough vitamins, but also like making sure we're getting a good mix, like a variety.
Exactly. Now, hormones, those are another fascinating group of molecules. They act like chemical messengers traveling through your bloodstream to regulate all sorts of processes.
I usually think of hormones in terms of like puberty and growth spurts,
Yeah.
but they do way more than that, right?
Oh, way more. They're involved in tons of processes, from regulating your metabolism and sleep cycles to controlling blood sugar levels, and even influencing our moods and emotions.
Really? So it's like they're the body's internal communication system, making sure everything runs smoothly.
Precisely. And some really well-known hormones include insulin, that regulates blood sugar, adrenaline,
Right.
which triggers that fight-or-flight response, and the sex hormones like testosterone and estrogen. They influence growth, development, and reproduction.
Okay, so we've got vitamins keeping things running smoothly inside,
Right.
hormones acting like messengers.
Yeah.
It's amazing how these like seemingly separate molecules all work together just to keep us alive and like functioning.
It really is. It's like this amazing symphony of molecular interactions. Right. But there's another key group of biomolecules we haven't talked about yet. Lipids.
Oh, lipids. So we're talking like fats, oils, waxes.
Yeah.
I gotta admit, when I hear lipids, the first thing I think of is cholesterol.
Well, cholesterol does get a lot of attention.
Right.
But lipids in general are actually incredibly diverse.
Okay.
And they play many essential roles in organisms. They're key components of cell membranes.
Right.
They act as long-term body stores.
Okay.
And they even serve as like signaling molecules.
So it's more than just like fat being stored in our bodies.
Absolutely. They're crucial for insulation, protecting our organs, helping us absorb certain vitamins.
Okay, so let's break down the different types. Like, where do we start?
Great question. So we can start with triglycerides. Those are the most common fat in our bodies and in our food.
Okay.
They have a glycerol molecule attached to 3 fatty acid chains.
So like a three-pronged fork
Yeah.
with like glycerol as the handle
Yeah.
and then the fatty acid chains as the prongs.
Exactly. And those fatty acid chains, those can be either saturated or unsaturated, which affects how they behave. Saturated fatty acids, they're usually solid at room temperature, like butter or lard.
Okay.
Unsaturated fatty acids, those are liquid, like olive oil or fish oil.
Okay. So saturated versus unsaturated. And I've heard like one's good and one's bad for you.
It's not quite that simple,
Right.
but generally diets that are really high in saturated fats have been linked to an increased risk of heart disease.
Okay.
While unsaturated fats, particularly monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats, are considered heart healthy.
So olive oil, avocado is good. Too much butter, not so good.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. But as with everything, moderation is key.
Always the key. So we got triglycerides, our main fat storage. Are there other like important types of lipids?
Yes, we have phospholipids. Those make up the cell membranes. They create that protective barrier that controls what goes in and out of the cell.
Oh yeah, the cell membranes. I remember learning about those. It's like the gatekeepers of the cell, right?
Exactly. And phospholipids have a super unique structure. It makes them perfect for the job.
All right.
They have what's called a hydrophilic head, which means it likes water,
Okay.
and a hydrophobic tail, which means it repels water.
So it's like a molecular Janus. Like it's got two faces. One loves water, the other avoids it.
That's a great way to think about it.
Yeah.
So in water, these phospholipids arrange themselves into a bilayer,
Right.
with the heads facing outward towards the watery environment, both inside and outside the cell.
Okay.
And those tails are tucked away in the middle, shielded from the water.
So it's like a self-assembling shield. Protecting the cell, that's amazing.
It is.
And what about cholesterol? That's a lipid too, right?
Yeah, cholesterol is a type of lipid called a sterol.
Okay.
It's a really important part of cell membranes.
Okay.
It's also a precursor for hormones like testosterone and estrogen.
So it's not just that bad guy that, like, clogs our arteries.
No, it's a common misconception. Our bodies actually need cholesterol. It's all about balance. Right.
Again.
When we have too much of the bad cholesterol, called LDL, and not enough of the good cholesterol, called HDL, then we run into problems.
Okay, so balance. Too much of anything, even if it's essential, can be a bad thing.
Exactly. And then we've got waxes, the last group of lipids we'll talk about.
Okay.
They're very hydrophobic
Okay.
and often found as like protective coatings on leaves, fruits, animal, fur, and feathers. Like, think about the waxy coating on an apple.
Right, it helps keep it from drying out. Like, it's nature's waterproofing.
You got it.
Okay. So lipids, they're a very diverse group of molecules with a huge range of functions, from energy storage and cellular structure to waterproofing.
Wow.
They're super essential for life, just like carbs, proteins, and nucleic acids.
This deep dive has been so interesting. It's crazy to think about how all these little molecules, carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, nucleic acids, they're all working together constantly.
Right. It's like this intricate dance of metabolism that keeps us alive and functioning. But I gotta ask, how does it all work together? It seems like there has to be like a conductor orchestrating this whole molecular symphony.
That's a great question, and that takes us to the amazing world of metabolism.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're totally right. It does take a conductor, and that's where metabolism comes in. It's basically all the chemical processes happening inside an organism to sustain life.
Okay, so it's not just the molecules themselves, but it's like how they're always interacting, changing, and being used to like keep everything running smoothly.
Yeah, exactly. Metabolism is this dynamic dance of building up and breaking down molecules, all perfectly orchestrated by this like complex network of enzymes, hormones, and signaling pathways.
Okay, I'm already a little lost.
Yeah.
How do we even like begin to understand something that complex?
Well, I think a good place to start is to like break down metabolism into two main categories, catabolism and anabolism. So catabolism, that's all about breaking down larger molecules into smaller ones, releasing energy along the way. Think of it like dismantling a huge Lego structure. You're freeing up all those individual blocks and like getting this burst of energy as you go.
Okay, so catabolism is like demolition and energy release.
Right.
What about anabolism?
Anabolism is the opposite. It's building up those complex molecules from simpler ones. It needs energy, just like putting those Lego blocks back together takes effort.
So it's like catabolism fuels anabolism.
Exactly.
This like constant cycle of breaking down and building up,
Yeah.
all powered by the energy we get from food.
Exactly. And these processes are always happening in every single cell of your body. When you eat, your digestive system breaks down those carbs, fats, and proteins through catabolic pathways, releasing energy that can then be used to fuel those anabolic processes like building muscle, repairing cells, synthesizing hormones.
It's wild to think about all these processes happening at the same time and like how it's all coordinated to like just keep us going.
It really is. And what makes it even more crazy is each of these metabolic reactions is controlled by enzymes.
Oh yeah, enzymes. We talked about those a bit earlier. Those are like the tiny catalysts that speed up those chemical reactions.
Right. And without them, these reactions would happen way too slow. Like it wouldn't even support life. Each enzyme is super specific. It's designed to catalyze a particular reaction. It's like having, a specialized tool for each job in a workshop.
Okay, so enzymes are the tools.
Right.
What about hormones and signaling pathways? Like, where do they fit into this whole metabolic orchestra?
So hormones are like the messengers, carrying signals throughout the body to regulate the metabolic activity. For example, when your blood sugar rises after eating, the pancreas releases insulin, which signals to your cells to take up glucose from the blood, and that helps lower blood sugar levels, keeping them in a healthy range.
So hormones are like the body's internal communication system, making sure the right messages are getting to the right places at the right time.
Exactly. And those signaling pathways, they're like the intricate wiring that connects those messages to specific actions within the cell. It's an incredibly complex and finely tuned system that allows our bodies to constantly adapt and respond to a constantly changing environment.
It's like our bodies are these super sophisticated factories with all these different departments working together. It's crazy.
That's a great way to put it. And what's so cool about metabolism is that it's not like a one-size-fits-all thing. Factors like your genes, age, activity level, even what's in your gut microbiome can all affect how your body metabolizes nutrients.
So what might work for one person might not work for another. Like that kind of explains why some people can eat whatever they want and not gain weight, while others struggle even when they're eating healthy.
Exactly. Understanding those individual differences is becoming more and more important as we try to create personalized approaches to health and nutrition.
This whole deep dive has been amazing. It's wild to think how all these tiny molecules, carbs, proteins, lipids, nucleic acids, are constantly at work in this intricate dance of metabolism just to keep us alive and functioning.
And this is really just the beginning.
Oh, wow.
Biochemistry is huge, and it's always evolving, always with new discoveries.
It's humbling to think about how much we still don't know about the inner workings of life, like at that molecular level.
I know. It's pretty incredible.
Okay, so as we wrap up this exploration of biomolecules, is there like one last thought you'd like to leave our listeners with?
I'd say never stop being curious. Never stop seeking knowledge. The more we understand about these building blocks of life, the better we can make decisions about our health, our environment, and the future of our planet.
That's a great point. Well, on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us on this amazing journey into the world of biomolecules.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun.